It's probably the most famous book on the planet, but have you ever stopped to think about how we even got it? Today, we're diving into the incredible, millennia-long journey of the Bible, from ancient, fragile scrolls all the way to the phone in your pocket. So let's get into its amazing story.
Okay, right off the bat, let's start with this mind-blowing fact. The collection of writings that we know as the Bible was essentially finalized, what scholars call the canon, way back around 400 AD. Just think about that for a second. That's more than 1,600 years ago. It really sets the stage for one of history's most fascinating tales of survival.
And this timeline really gives you a bird's-eye view of just how epic that journey is. We're talking about a story that stretches across almost 3,500 years, from the very first writings on animal skins all the way to the digital age. This isn't a short story, folks. It's a true epic. Let's start at the beginning.
So, our first stop is the Old Testament. And the crazy thing is, it took a staggering 1,500 years to write and compile. This wasn't one book written by one person over a weekend. It was more like an entire library, built piece by piece over many, many generations.
And just think about the scale of this. You've got more than 40 different authors contributing over a millennium and a half. They're writing in Hebrew and Aramaic, covering everything from law and history to beautiful poetry and prophecy. And all of it, every single word, was meticulously copied by hand onto scrolls made of animal skin. What a massive undertaking.
Now, for a very long time, this created a huge puzzle for historians. The original texts were written thousands of years ago, right? But the oldest copies anyone had were from the 9th century AD. That left this massive gap of over 1,000 years where the texts were just being copied and recopied.
Which leads to the million-dollar question. After 1,000 years of being copied by hand, how could we possibly know if the version we had was accurate? Was it all just a giant historical game of telephone? For centuries, nobody could say for sure.
And then, in 1947, a shepherd boy exploring some caves near the Dead Sea stumbled onto something that changed everything. He found ancient clay jars, and inside were leather manuscripts that had been hidden away for nearly 2,000 years. You might have heard of them, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Why was this such a big deal? Well, these scrolls dated all the way back to the 1st century BC, a full 1,000 years older than any copy we had before. And here's the kicker. When scholars compared them to the 9th century versions, they were overwhelmingly, almost perfectly identical. The few differences were tiny, like minor spelling variations. It was incredible proof that the texts had been preserved with amazing accuracy.
All right, now let's switch gears and turn to the New Testament, because its story is totally different. It unfolds on a much, much faster timeline.
A big part of this story is actually a technology upgrade. See, while the Old Testament was on scrolls, the New Testament was written using something called a codex, which is basically an early version of a book with bound pages. This was a game changer. It made the texts way more durable, easier to carry around, and much easier to read and share.
And check out this contrast. Instead of taking 1,500 years, all 27 books of the New Testament were written within a single generation, roughly between 50 and 90 AD. These were written by eyewitnesses, or people who knew the eyewitnesses, talking about the life of Jesus and the early church. And because of that, there was a pretty quick consensus on which books were the core of the message.
So, for more than 1,000 years, the Bible was complete, but for most people, it was locked away in Latin. Only the highly educated elite could actually read it. So the next chapter in this journey is a really dangerous one, the fight to get it into the hands of everyday people.
This part of the story is just wild. It starts with a guy named John Wycliffe in the 14th century who defied the authorities to create the first English Bible. Well, the powers that be were not happy, and in 1408 they made it illegal. But you can't stop an idea. A century later, William Tyndale was printing his English New Testaments in Germany and smuggling them into England inside bales of cloth. For the crime of translation, he was arrested and executed.
So what finally broke the dam? Honestly, it was politics. When King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church to form the Church of England, everything changed. He eventually commanded that an English Bible, one that built on the risky work of pioneers like Tyndale, be placed in every single church in the country. It was a political move that gave everyone direct access to the text. And from this point on, the Bible's journey just explodes. It goes from being a national book to a global phenomenon that's still adapting and changing today. Then, in 1611, we get a true landmark, the King James Version. 50 scholars worked on this thing, and it wasn't just a translation, it was a literary masterpiece. So many phrases we still use today, like the salt of the earth or a law unto themselves, they come from this book. It literally shaped the English language.
And that work of translation that Tyndale died for? Well, just look at this number. Over 2,500. That's how many languages the Bible, or parts of it, has been translated into today. It makes it accessible to billions of people all over the world in their own native language. Which, of course, brings us to right now. The journey has gone fully digital. There are countless new translations, you can read it online, download audio versions, and get study apps on your phone. There's even, and I'm not making this up, an emoji Bible. The form just keeps evolving in ways those ancient authors could never, ever have imagined.
So, after a journey of 3.5 millennia, from fragile scrolls to modern emojis, you really have to wonder, what could the next chapter possibly hold for the world's most popular book?